nice to be back up here. I'm just going to take a moment and drink it in.
A clap.
Debbie Holmes, our theater department professor during our time at Whitman, describes John Moe this way. Are you ready, John? Being funny isn't something you can learn. It's a gift that one is born with, and John Moe is one of those with such a gift. He is a truly funny man. His droll sense of humor is entertaining, unique, and thought-provoking. John describes himself on his website as, I ask a lot of questions, write about things that fascinate me, and speak into microphones. He is, however, much more than that. He is the host and creator of the award-winning podcast, The Hilarious World of Depression, and the author of 3 books. His writings appeared in numerous humor anthologies, as well as the New York Times Magazine, Sweeney's, the Seattle Times, and many more publications. He's also written plays that have been performed on 3 continents. I personally remember seeing an excerpt from one of his books in a Reader's Digest in a doctor's office, and I was like, oh my God, I know this guy! And I was trying not to announce it to the lady next to me. John has hosted nationally distributed public radio programs such as WITS, Weekend America, and Marketplace Tech, and his radio work has been featured on Marketplace, All Things Considered, and Morning Edition. He lives in St. Paul. John and I were both drama majors here at Whitman. We shared this stage many times, including in She Loves Me, The Mystery of Edwin Drood, Noises Off, Love's Labor's Lost, and The Chagrin, which I'd actually forgotten about. He acted in other shows including Cyrano de Bergerac, The Nerd, Cymbeline, The Road to Mecca, and A Midsummer Night's Dream. He designed sound for The Common Pursuit and worked the booth on the world premiere of Climbing the Fourth Wall. Did I get that right?
I think so.
Do you remember that? Yeah. I will tell you, I remember John being incredibly funny and intelligent, and although I don't remember the exact details of the speech he gave at our graduation, I remember it being perfect for the occasion. Truthfully, I was often jealous of John's ease and his talent. I'm just putting that out here on the table, John. It was only recently I learned that John and I have something in common beyond our Harper Joy Theater experience. We both struggled with mental illness here while at Whitman and in our adult lives. We have both chosen to live transparently, speaking about our illnesses in hopes of helping to remove stigma and encouraging others who are traveling a similar journey. Although our medium and approach are different, we are both committed to making a difference around this difficult topic. I am honored to introduce John to the stage to share with us the hilarious world of depression.
Thank you so much. Kim and I and Erica Walsrud were all 3 cast in Noises Off like the second day on campus of our freshman year, so we never had a chance. And Erica couldn't be here. She's acting in New York. I was just watching this show Manifest on NBC, where this plane disappears and then like shows up 5 years later, but the people on the plane don't know any difference. And Erica plays the airplane inspector, trying to figure out why it happened. And I'm like, this is great. Good job, Erica. You got this great part of paranormal airplane inspector. But then at the end of the pilot episode, the plane explodes and she's out of a job. Good while it lasted. People have been coming up saying, I can't wait to see what you're going to do. And I'm like, yeah, I can't wait to find out. But I did show up here 2 hours early today to put on my Ben Nye makeup and not participate in vocal warm-ups. And just before I came out here, they were adjusting the lights, so they made sure to have a good light on me, and I instantly went back. The first, I think it might have been my first time on stage here, or maybe just the first lunchbox that I did, but I did a lunchbox, the Great American Cheese Sandwich, and I had to go downstage and do a a short, like, little paragraph monologue, and I stepped right out of the light and just did my little bit for the thing in complete darkness. Afterwards, they just said, "Oh yeah, there he goes," and wondered why I did that. And also, it's great to be back at Whitman and see all the leaves and the catalog style photographic opportunities. And they don't have the students hanging out of the Lyman Hall window that we used to have with the overrepresented people of color population, and to show more diversity than we had in the late 1980s. But I've been touring around a lot of colleges like Whitman with my son, who's a high school senior, and so all these, and I'd always thought Whitman was like this completely unique, special place until you go to like colleges everywhere that look a lot like it and offer the same sorts of things, and I'm like, oh, I just went to a type of college, and then I remembered that Whitman is special and is unique because we had Jack and we had this place. And he was a man, and this is a place unlike any other. And it's you try to describe it to people, and it's just no good. And you just have to smile a little bit inside and just use that in lieu of an explanation. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the show that I host and kind of the things I've learned from it. I'm in the midst of writing a rather voluminous memoir right now, so I'm kind of always at a loss for like what to include, what not to include. But I was a theater major, I was an actor, and I think a lot of the reason why I did theater, like I was okay at it. I had a little bit of talent. I think I had less talent than I really thought I did. But I had a good time doing it, and it was always, I had this really gnawing mental condition, this what I later found out was depression starting in junior high, and my solution was to just stuff it down and not let anybody know. Because I didn't think it was depression because I wasn't like mopey sad all the time. I was just like occasionally my brain would just do things that I didn't want it to do. And but then when I found that I could do theater, it was really great. Because in theater, you can go up on a stage and you can know what you're going to say to the other people, and you can know what they're going to say in response. And you can read what's going to happen over the course of that time. So anytime I could be in a rehearsal or in a performance, it was great, because that's like somebody who can't handle like the day-to-day actions of the world quite as nimbly. This is like, okay, I'm going to go there, it's all on the script, and then at the end people will approve of me by clapping. I can't provide that for myself, so I'll just milk it off of others. Very healthy. And so theater was a natural fit. When I did 10 billion plays here, like we always did. Except the year after I left was the year that we did like 21 plays. And those people won't fucking shut up. They have shirts that say it. It's a little like war veterans, though. You just have to let them have their parades and wish them the best. When I left Whitman, I went straight to graduate school at Rutgers University, and it was a Meisner training program, and it was very yell at you oriented. You had to do things the way they wanted them done. And it was like the Marine Corps. It was a lot of like, we're gonna break you and then we're gonna rebuild you how we want you rebuilt. And the whole, I was interviewing one of my, it didn't work out. And I left there early, and it was the right thing to do. but I was trying to figure out why it didn't work out. And I was interviewing one of my old teachers there for my book, and she said, well, to us it was just really important, or she said to me it was really important that my students take this seriously, that they needed to take it very seriously, that they weren't going to goof around, they were going to take it seriously. And I said, aha, there's the point of separation. Because I was of the belief that theater was art and discovery and celebration of this time that we get to spend together in this room, right? Like, this is what makes it different from TV or movies or anything else. Like, we get together in this room, and some of us have a story to tell the others of us, and then we're all together for a moment. And it can be a lot of fun, and it can be full of discovery, and you can try some new bit of business on stage, and then from the back of the house you can hear it. And then be told that someone loves it and that you should keep it. So yeah, that didn't work out, because I really like to make things, and I really like to build something that wasn't there before, and that's what theater was able to do, especially here, especially the way we did it. They should do more plays here.
Yeah.
I just wanted to say that on stage. So I got into radio after acting for a while and sort of losing the love of the professional world of acting. And I got into radio because it was a chance to be curious about something and then ask a lot of questions until you started to figure it out, and then ask a lot more questions. So it was kind of my style. Plus it was a way of like performing and getting all that approval from strangers while sitting in the convenience of a small booth far away from the strangers. It was a good fit. And a few years ago, I was hosting this national radio show called Wit, and it was comedy and music, and I was either writing or supervising the writing of a new episode every week, and it was this dream come true that was killing me, because I found out during the course of that time that I had the kind of depression that converts stress into more depression. Conveniently, I work in media with deadlines. But the more that the pressure and the stress of that built up, the more I kind of buckled under the weight of it. And I was in a position where I'm like, this is the dream job. I think I want to quit, because I don't think I want to live like this anymore. And then the show was canceled conveniently, which saved me a trip. Because, I guess we needed to make way for Mark Garrison Keeler, back when that was a good thing to make way for. Bitter? And I did this thing where I thought, well, I want to keep having a job here at this place where I worked, and so I better come up with a new show. And I thought, well, it's sort of like when you need to make dinner, right? What do? You go into the kitchen, you open the cupboard, you open the fridge, you see what you have to work with, and then you get cooking. And for me, in real life, it's an omelet, and it's not very good. But figuratively, I thought, well, maybe, what do I have here? I know a lot of comedians, I know a lot of musicians who I've worked with, who've become friends, who've shared things with me about their mental health and about the prevalence of depression among creative people. And some of them even talk about it in their act. I'm like, okay, I got that, I got those comedians. And then with depression, I had this thing that I had been dealing with for a long time. I finally got diagnosed in my mid-30s. I had been shoving everything into this shoebox and suppressing it until the shoebox started to bulge out and rip, and the things started pouring out all over the place. And not long after that, I lost my older brother to suicide, who had been dealing with depression and mental problems and was too ashamed of it to ever get adequate treatment. So I thought, all right, I have depression, I have a history of depression. I was finding that when I did talk about it on social media or in appearances that I did, it got a tremendous response. People were really hungry to talk about it. And so we developed this show, The Hilarious World of Depression. And it became a hit. At one point it was number 2 on the overall podcast charts worldwide, or among podcasts where no one gets murdered, number 1. And so we thought when it launched that only a few people would really be into it, because there's a lot of people with depression in the world and in the United States, but it's a finite number, and of course not everybody is. But we found that, everybody is affected by it. Everybody knows a relative, a friend, a neighbor, a coworker who is affected by it. Everybody lives in an economy and under a healthcare system, I guess we could call it a system, under a healthcare travesty, where that's affected by people with mental illness. And there's been so little discussion of it that maybe we can set that apart by starting to discuss it. So we've done this show now we're in our 3rd year, and we're, I think, around 9 million downloads. It's going really well. We've won awards, we've won a lot of press. And I wanted to share with you some of these things that I've learned from having a lot of these discussions with people. Now, the challenge of, hi Don Juan in hell, I forgot about you. Good to see you. It's great to have a reunion with old friends. I think the idea of talking about 10 things that I've learned about talking about depression with celebrities sounds really tedious, because round number 6 at most, you're going to be thinking, oh God, how many more of these do we have? So what I decided to do was accompany all the points by pictures of animals wearing people clothes. I think those are Icelandic horses wearing Icelandic wool sweaters. Before we get into this, I remembered one honorary mention that didn't make the list because it's too specific. If you ever have a full-scale panic attack in LeBron James's trailer on a commercial shoot, he will take care of you, and he's very good at it. A friend of mine was directing a Sprite commercial starring LeBron James and Lil Yachty, because I never know how to pronounce the Lil in rappers' names, so I kind of get it all glottal. Lil Yachty. And apparently LeBron James sprung into action and knew just what to do if someone's having a panic attack. He had mental health first aid slam dunk abilities. So if you ever find yourself in that situation, you're going to be okay. Don't worry about it. So we'll go through some of these things that I've learned from talking to all these people. Number one thing is that people want to talk. This has been the great discovery of doing this show. We send out invitations to people I know, people I don't know, saying, we understand that you've dealt with depression. Would you like to be interviewed about it? And so many times they say, yeah, I would like to do that. Even though we offer so little in return, we accept the ability to open up about it and to maybe help other people figure something out earlier than the interview subject did. We got a call, we had asked to interview Jeff Tweedy of the band Wilco. And they said, well, he's willing to do it, but you have to come down to Chicago to Wilco's rehearsal space loft. And I'm like, oh, damn it, okay. And this is how good of an actor I am. I'm like, oh yeah, this is a normal place for me to go. More talented than I thought, all all over again. And I talked to Jeff about his music, but also about his life and about his depression and his addictions and how he, at the height of Wilco's popularity, when they're filling large theaters, multiple dates, he's standing outside of a Walgreens in the parking lot waiting for the Wilco fan who works in the pharmacy to slip him extra opioids, because that's what had happened in his mind. There was a whole slate of performers, comedians who agreed to be on the show for the first season when we didn't have any sample shows out. And apparently you can call Dick Cavett and say, hey, I'm a stranger with a podcast, so you know it's legit. And will you come talk to me about your innermost secrets? And he says, sure, I'll drive over to his studio and do that. People are really eager to talk. I mean, Jeff Tweedy has nothing to gain from doing my show, but I find that if you're doing something cool and you ask directly, people will often say yes. And often what happens when I do public appearances is people will come up and talk to me afterwards about their own experiences. They won't really have any feedback on what I've said, and they won't ask me any questions. But I was at the grocery store in St. Paul, and this guy comes up and says, hey, I'm a fan of your work. I'm like, oh, that's great, thank you. He's like, yeah, I've been listening to your new podcast. And he shakes my hand and introduces himself. And then as he's shaking my hand, he says, you know, because I've struggled too. Here's what's been happening in my family. Here's what was happening with my parents. And we're shaking hands. And then at one point he's talking, and we sort of stop shaking hands, but we don't let go. And I realized I'm just holding a dude's hand by the oranges and hearing about the worst days of his mental health life. People really want to talk. You don't need notes. Sort of like the people want to talk thing. This is something that you can try at home, even if you don't have a podcast. And please, if you don't have one, don't get one. Far too many. I used to, and you don't need notes is sort of the same thing. I used to do interviews. I've been in public radio for like 17, 18 years now. And I used to really prep for each interview. I would read everything that the person wrote, yeah, and I still do that. But I would come up with all these scripted questions. I would anticipate where the arc of the conversation was. I would kind of say, this is the path I want to take. And then I would be trying to get back to that arc of that conversation that I had planned. And so this time around I said, well, why don't I just do everything opposite? Why don't I just Costanza this and just do everything the other way around? And it went really great. Something about going into an interview with somebody who sees that you have no questions written down is reassuring to the person you're talking to. And you ask the question that's on your mind, and then you ask your next question in response to the answer that they gave. It's a really relaxing, in the moment, non-anxiety producing way to interview people, which makes it much nicer for the person, for both people really involved. And it's a lesson, I think, in talking to people about mental health. Everybody's mental health journey is a little bit different, sometimes a lot different. And if you want to talk to somebody about what's going on with them, it's a great reminder to listen first and then talk based on what you've heard. I mean, it's a bit of an acting concept. It's the pinch and the ouch, right? Like, so somebody does something and then you're responding in real time. So if you know that somebody close to you is having a problem with depression or an eating disorder, whatever it is, and you want to talk to them, just go in and be prepared to mostly listen and talk not as much. Number 3, you can't spot it, genius. I have a friend who's a comedian named Paul F. Tompkins, and Paul is a very gregarious performer and a very gregarious person. He's a very nice guy. And I I reached out to him when we were doing this show, and I said, hey, do you know anybody that maybe hasn't talked about their depression very much, but this would be a good venue that might work for them? And he said, yeah, he's emailing you right now. And he meant himself. And I thought, but Paul? That's impossible. He's so nice, he's so friendly, he's so outgoing. But that's not how it works. Sometimes people, often performing people, are very good at putting on a performance. And we talked about his family life, and we talked about everything that he had gone through, and it was really, really remarkable, and it was a really good lesson for me in judging people on that, because I think that if I'm remembered here for being funny, that's great. I love comedy. I always love doing it. But a lot of times, if you're funny, people will say, well, he's making us laugh all the time. And sometimes those people are making you laugh, making other people laugh for a reason. Paul F. Tompkins was just on a live show we did, and I was going to introduce him as, because he's on the Netflix show BoJack Horseman. He plays Mr. Peanut Butter, who's a golden retriever. And I said, he's the only character on BoJack Horseman not depressed. And Paul said, now John, we don't know he's not depressed. So sometimes cartoon dogs can be just as depressed as human beings. Peter Sagal, the host of Wait, Wait, Don't Tell Me, when we were getting ready to launch this show, he said, hey, I hear you're doing this show. Well, I want in. And I'm like, no, you don't get to host this one too. I didn't know what he was talking about, because Peter has a hit show. He's successful. He runs marathons. He's funny. That's not how it works. You can be any of those things and be depressed. You can be really down on your luck and not be depressed. It's a mental condition. It's an illness. It's often a brain chemistry issue. It has nothing to do with the work you do or how you appear to the world. Everybody's a fraud. Now, everybody in this room is very intelligent. They're connected to Whitman College. It's a smart place. Either you're an alum who's gone out in the world and done great things, or you're a student. Thanks, students, for being here. Who is really bright and belongs here, all except for one of you. No, I'm kidding. When I was here, I took a Chinese Civ class, and the professor said, well, I've gotten papers from all of you except for one. And then everybody started freaking out. He's like, I've gotten no papers at all from any. It was one of the best comedy performances I saw. Everyone I talked to with any degree of accomplishment who's dealt with mental illness in any way feels like an imposter. Feels like soon the door will get kicked down and they'll be dragged away and will be pointed out and mocked. A friend of mine, Neil Brennan, is a comedian, and he is also a writer and director, and he works on a lot of big movies. And he was telling me famous actors, Oscar winners for Best Actor and Best Actress, that he have this. They say it's just a matter of time until someone says, oh, wait, you're not any good at acting at all. You don't deserve that Oscar. I've talked to comedians who've gotten sitcoms with their name in the title. And when they get there, they think, I better achieve one more thing and get out of this situation, because I don't want anyone to figure out that I don't belong here. I spent 4 years at Whitman College thinking, ooh, I got in here by mistake. There was a filing issue. I don't belong here at all. And I've come to believe that the ones to really look out for are the ones who say, yes, I belong here in this position. All these achievements I have are completely earned, and I am 100% confident in this position. I have yet to meet such a person. So if you ever have that feeling, you are so completely not alone. I suspect, I have a sort of alternate bizarro world theory, is that it's all true. We are all imposters, and none of us belong here. So let's just improvise. It's not your fault. I grew up in a time not so long ago, because even though I graduated in 1990, I'm still only like 27. That's right, I was -3 when I enrolled. I grew up in a time when if people were having problems with mental health, unless it was like psychosis, unless it was clearly demonstrably aberrant behavior, it was seen as, well, keep that under wraps and maybe just try not having that, if you will. And we still talk about that. Maria Bamford has been on our show, and she's from Minnesota. I've gotten to know her a little bit. She does this whole bit about what if we talked about other illnesses the way we talk about mental illnesses. Like, it's such a nice day. What is there to have leukemia about on a day like today? If you just smiled more, maybe you wouldn't have such diabetes. Ever think of that? Oh yeah, I had a really sad day at work one time, and that's why I lost a leg. No, it doesn't. Yeah, I grew up thinking that it was a weakness, and that if I was braver and stronger, that I would not have this anymore. That it was a personal failing. That it was like an original sin kind of thing. Like, you're screwed. You better start making up for this with your actions, which can be really distressing when you try to be stronger and braver and actually get pretty strong and pretty brave, and the shit doesn't go away. And the reason for this is that it's not your fault. There's a reason in Good Will Hunting where Robin Williams has to say that line about 20 times before Matt Damon starts to believe it. Well, Matt Damon's character. Matt Damon might already believe it. Look, I can't speak for Matt Damon as well. It's a thief, and it steals your ability to think well of yourself. Now, I usually do this as a 10-item list. I'm going to take a little intermission in my list to talk about Jack Freimann. And this morning I was having some coffee, and I was thinking, well, what do I want? How do you encapsulate Jack? And I just started to make some notes, and then I didn't erase any of them, so I just put them all up there. Do something, try something. You can read the whole thing. And a lot of what Jack taught I found to be very useful, because Jack was a let's get it up on its feet kind of teacher and director. There wasn't a lot of table work in a Jack Freimann production. There wasn't a lot of thinking about what you're supposed to do. There was a lot of doing it and then learning by doing it and getting active and interacting with other people. And so it really comes to getting out of the house. Like that's over and over when I talk to people who are depressed or have been depressed, the hardest thing to do is to get out of the bed, is to get out of the house, is to get out and see the friends. It can be incredibly gratifying when you do it, when you finally get to do those things. But it's that moment of like, ugh, do I have to do this? Jack was all about getting to the moment where you're doing the things and you're discovering the things and you're making discoveries and you're doing something new. And it's been a really therapeutic thing for me, and it's been a therapeutic thing for a lot of people I know who have never heard of Jack or Whitman College. It's an approach to life that involves just getting up on stage and trying something out. And ideally, if you could do a little business with a hat, so much. And yeah, it's I've given up trying to explain this part of Jack to a lot of people, so I'm really grateful to be in a room where everybody already knows about him. I like that picture. I wanted to find like a PNG, like a transparent picture of Jack, and then just like insert it in like all sorts of great works of art to show how he was behind it all. I don't have those Photoshop skills. Number 6, there's no achieving your way out of this, baby kangaroo. There's this idea that if you just get the next thing, all these bad feelings will go away. All this, these intrusive looping thoughts, this despair, this insomnia. I mean, depression can take so many forms. This sort of erratic approach to food, these bursts of rage that'll all get worked out if you just get into Whitman College, or if you just get cast in the lead in that play at Harper Joy, or if you just get into this grad school, or get this part in the professional world, or if you get promoted, or if you get married to this person, or if you get a house, or if you just get a bigger house, it'll be fine. If you just get that next promotion. And when you think back on it, if you're one of these people who have tried to achieve your way out of your own head, it's really dumb, because you think, well, none of those other things ever cured it. And then you think, yeah, but this next thing will. I interviewed a comedian named Gary Gulman, who did this. He's been a veteran comedian, and he did this set on the Conan show about how all the states got their abbreviations. It's this total high-wire, high-concept bit, and it killed. Like, every comedian I know was sending around the YouTube of this bit and saying, this is how it's done, children. This is great stand-up. And it got a lot of acclaim from the general public, but I asked Gary, like, how did that feel? Like, all your colleagues, these giants of the industry are praising you, and this video has millions of hits. Are you happy now? And he said, well, I knew it was really good, and I knew it went over well. And my first thought was, what if I can't do that again? What if I can't ever top that? And that's what depression does. It steals your ability to feel good about the thing that you're doing. But beyond that, it makes you live in a world where nothing is good enough, where you're trying to achieve the next thing, and you're always achieving the next thing. It's like a monkey's paw, Twilight Zone, gypsy curse kind of thing, where I'll let you be successful, I'm just not going to let you ever enjoy it. That's the deal that you're making with, I want to say, depression Satan. This is a character I've just invented on the spot. Trickster Rod Serling, Depression Satan. Also the name of my new ska band. It's easier to fight stigma when you have privilege, like our friend, the tiny poodle in a chiffon skirt. I campaign against stigma, and I have some thoughts on that word coming up here in a little bit. But I fight about this all the time, because not getting treatment and thinking that it's bad, thinking that it's a sign of weakness to get treatment, to get even a diagnosis. I kind of dealt with that for a long time. And it killed my brother also. And so I think, well, why doesn't everybody just do this? Why doesn't everybody just start talking about it? And it's the easiest thing in the world for me to say, because I'm a white heterosexual guy. And I have all the trappings of society to fall back on. I have plenty of support. I have centuries of support because of the role I was born into. And something that I've found and have been might have known intellectually, but have learned more when I've talked to people, is that the amount at which you can fight stigma is proportionate to the amount of privilege that you have. And if you aren't someone like me, it gets harder because it's a matter of getting by in society. I interviewed Margaret Cho, who is Korean American, and the culture of the Korean Americans in the Bay Area is achievement and making your business succeed and doing everything you can to show how productive you are, because that is your sign of strength, and that is how you will make your mark in this country. And so talking about a mental illness is an incredibly outside the lines thing to do. When you watch Margaret in her act and in kind of her public persona, it is a revolutionary thing against the culture she grew up in. She was telling me about a family in her neighborhood who was Korean American who just wanted to, who just got this beautiful white carpet and was having a party to show off the white carpet to all their friends, to say like, look what we could afford, this beautiful white carpet. But then their nephew shot himself in that room, and it stained the white carpet, so they moved the table over the white carpet and had the party anyway. I interviewed Reggie Osei, who is who's since passed away. He was a hip-hop impresario, writer, lawyer, podcast host, and he said, you know, I would have, and he had just been diagnosed with depression, started opening up about it at age 50. And he said, I would have liked to have done it a long time before, but I deal with the toxic masculinity of the hip-hop culture, which is a defensive front. So I couldn't afford this, or I was going to lose my credibility, or I was going to be afraid to lose my credibility. And there is a lot that we need to take into account when we're trying to drag people out of the closet and get them to talk about mental illness. It's just not so simple. If you're in a vulnerable position in society, the thinking, consciously or unconsciously, will be, well, I don't want to set myself up for any more knocks, because I don't have a lot to fall back on. Language matters, Mr. Squirrel. So we use a lot of terminology about mental illness to describe things that are in no way mental illness. In the same way that you say, oh, I'm so mad at Brad, I'm going to kill him. You're not going to kill Brad. But it's the same thing when you say, oh, I'm so OCD about my pencils on my desk. Maybe you're just tidy. Maybe you don't have PTSD from your bad date last night. Maybe your date just didn't go so well. Because if you've met someone with OCD or PTSD in a truly clinical diagnosed way, it's not the same thing at all. But we have a tendency, and this has really been on my mind lately, our latest edition of my show, which came out this past Monday, talks all about this. We have a tendency in society to take the things that we're afraid of and then adopt them into a new meaning that is less frightening. So if you're afraid that you might have obsessive compulsive disorder, or if you're afraid that as a human you could potentially have it, and especially if you really understand what it is and how debilitating it can be, you will take that term and apply it to your pencils, and then it's not so scary, right? Because then even if you do have it, it's just pencils, it's fine. But it's sort of a destructive act because it turns other people's perceptions of that word into just you and your tidiness and your pencils. Or when you change your mind and say, I'm schizophrenic about this. Or when you're say that you're depressed, when in fact you're just sad, which is an emotion, and one of many emotions that a healthy, treated person with depression has. Like if you're depressed, you can be sad and you can be happy. All it means is that you need a little extra help to get to the place that the normies blithely walk into all by themselves. And I was talking with a therapist about this, not my therapist, but a therapist who specializes in terminology. And she said, even the word stigma, and we have fighting stigma built right into like the charter of our show. Said even the word stigma is weird because it often just applies to things that are discrimination. If you talk about having stigma about something, you're sort of blaming on society the thing that you should be responsible for yourself. And treating people based on whether they have a mental illness that might be under control isn't all that different from treating them differently based on other things that are well known for being discriminated against. So terminology, it's dumb, stop doing it wrong. I'm guilty of it myself because I still will describe something as crazy or nuts when it's just different than I expected. And I'm really hesitant to let go of the word bonkers because I just love it so much. And I don't think it's a medical diagnosis. I don't think they would say, Mr. Smith, I'm afraid you're bonkers. Now I kind of wish they would be. There's no magic cure, dog in a banana suit. When I got diagnosed by Dr. Michael Kovar in West Seattle, and I remember his name because you remember the names of people who saved your life, I said, well, what does this mean? Like, am I gonna have to be on pills forever? Because I didn't know much. Which isn't a thing, by the way, that like, people talk about antidepressants in a way different from how they talk about like insulin or Lipitor. Like, if I have to be on pills my whole life and not feel like I did before, okay, I'm sold. Bring on the pills. And he said, well, we could try pills. There's also therapy. There's different types of therapy. We could look at exercise. We could look at diet. We could. There's a lot of people who get a lot out of meditation, yoga, prayer. There's a lot of different ways we can go. And I'm like, well, which way are we going to go? He's like, I don't know. Where do you want to start? And there's no one thing that works for everybody. And if there was, we wouldn't be in this mess, and suicide rates wouldn't be at a 30-year high. And we'd all be doing it. And unfortunately, it doesn't work that way. It's this long trial and error, emphasis on error, period, to figure out what works for you. And then sometimes you'll be on some pills, they'll work, and then they'll stop working. And then you gotta go figure something else out. I know people who go to Al-Anon because it's an organization about sort of surviving with a loved one who is going through an addiction. And they find the experience of that very similar to living with depression, living with this sort of mental thing that is happening that is out of your control. So everybody kind of finds their own way. I saw a nice little exchange on Twitter once where somebody said, well, I don't want to take a pill that's going to make me happy all the time. And somebody else said, one, that's not how the medication works. And two, why wouldn't you? That sounds fantastic. I want that pill right now. Finally, there is no finally. There's no ending. A few years ago, I was hired by Warner Brothers to write a screenplay for a movie based on the cartoon Adventure Time. So I had been hosting a podcast at the time about Adventure Time. It's a really great show. And they decided they get screenplays written, several of them for any movie that might ever get made. Mine's never going to get made. And I was talking to one of the producers, and they said, so yeah, just write it in the traditional 3-act structure, and then have it for us by the 17th. I'm like, okay, yeah, that sounds good. I'm Googling traditional 3-act story. What is that? And it's the formula for almost every Hollywood movie that you see, where the hero is in his or her natural element, a disruptive force comes in, and a tremendous endangerment has been established. Then the hero has to go on a quest, has to go on a journey of some kind to make things right. Along the way, usually they meet some friends, wacky or dangerous, we can't tell, and they overcome obstacles. And then at the beginning of the third act, they're faced with the most insurmountable obstacle of all. How are they ever going to get out of this? And yet they do, and they're fine. And then they return to home a little wiser and more powerful and with more of an understanding of their true potential. It's most movies that you see. Maybe not My Dinner with Andre, but aside from that, every movie that you see. And it's really intoxicating, and we are a story-driven culture. We're guided by our movies and our television shows culturally. And so a lot of people expect the bottoming out of their mental health to be the beginning of the third act, and that then they're going to get this figured out, they're going to find a formula, and then they're going to be okay. It doesn't work like that. It is just this ongoing journey that concludes when you die, unfortunately, because you don't know what a mental illness is going to do. And when you let go, the people I know who are doing the best, who I've interviewed for the show, are the ones who just say, all right, let's buckle the fuck up and ride this thing. And the ones who think, I've just got to figure this out and solve it, are usually in a bad place, because they think that it can be solved instead of a journey that they need to go on. They're never going to get back to their hometown, but maybe they'll meet some adorable creatures along the way. And so I don't know how my story will end. It's certainly gone in a bunch of directions I never expected to, including back to, do you know how terrified I've been for weeks since Nancy Mitchell said, oh yeah, we're going to put you on stage at Harper Joy. I'm like, okay. How about joining you on stage will be your entire fucking past? Oh, okay, great. Looking forward to that. So that's kind of all I have. There's our website. You can listen to the show if you want. But I remember when we set out to do this show, and I thought, are we really doing this? Are we really doing a show about where we talk to comedians about the bleakest possible topics, thereby ruining the whole point of having comedians on in the first place? And I thought, well, what would Jack do? Jack would just say, well, get up there and do it. And so we got up there and did it. I'm glad we did. Thank you. That's all I have. I guess everyone can go to their next class. I'll hang out maybe down here if anybody has questions or wants to talk or bring over some oranges so we can all hear.